Thank you very much for coming. There was a few people that didn't make it, which is a shame for them. But, they're going to miss out on a good night. Syrah, Cortona, DOC. The history of the wine, I tried to look up, and there were so many conflicting reports. I've decided to sort of choose one of the reports, and that is that a Count Monte Carlo of Arezzo brought the grape from the Rhone-Saône Valley in France, where it's obviously the predominant grape, over here in around about the sort of middle of the 20th century. And they made certain sort of inroads into sort of planting it in certain areas, Cortona being one, and it didn't really sort of take on. That is until D'Alessandro up in Manzano, they took it. In the 80s they were doing a lot of experimentation. They got a professor from the University of Milan. He did a lot of work, and he reckoned that this particular rootstock was fine for Cortona, because Cortona has similar soil structures and similar weather patterns, microclimates, to that of the Rhone-Saône Valley. So Syrah really was here for about 30, 40 years, didn't do too much, and then D'Alessandro, I think their first vintage was 92, and it was called Bosco. Now it's called Il Bosco, but it was 92. Another grape that they did bring in was Viognier, and that also sort of went to sleep for a while and is now coming through. So if you get any Viognier from this area, it's very, very good, wonderful quality, good expression. Okay, so Syrah, I mentioned that it came from the Rhone-Saône Valley. It was two grapes, a white grape called Mondeluce Bianco, and another grape I can't pronounce, but I'll do my best, Bianco, he would tell me. They got these two grapes together, and it produced this Syrah. Syrah itself is a very unusual grape because it has a lot of names. Now, my friends over here, many from Australia, they would know Syrah as Shiraz. How many other names do you think it's got? Hermitage. Hermitage is the old name for Syrah from Savoy. And some of those earlier, I'm talking about 1990, Georges Perrin, Hermitage, you can buy it for about 800 or 900 a bottle, should you wish. So, very expensive, but it actually has 12 names. I was astounded. I mean, Sangiovese has now got about 5 or 6, 12 names, and they're all the same grape. They're all this Syrah. Anyway, D'Alessandro started it in the early 90s. Around about the 2000, there was a few producers, about half a dozen, 6, 7, 8, and they got together and made a consortium. Since then, 20 years, there are now 60 producers, all fully paid up members of the consortia producing Cortona. And Cortona is, as I said to you earlier on, one or two of you, it's the capital of Syrah in Italy, as far as I'm concerned. You get various sort of down on the coast, Argentaria, 1 or 2 winemakers make tremendous Syrah, but the prices are astronomical. Here they managed to keep the price point down to a point of reality. But if you go anywhere else, Syrah's about 2, 3, 4 times the price. Is it worth it? Well, that's up to your palate. So anyway, I noticed that when you were all out there sort of quaffing away and looking at glasses and swirling and all the rest of it, that you sort of are quite familiar holding a glass of wine. And I was just wondering what you're actually looking for in a glass of wine. Because I see all these sort of people that do some very strange things with a glass of wine. And I thought it might be a good idea for me to sort of tell you what I do. Firstly, the first thing that you need to find out is the colour. And you do that by not swirling it, throwing it up in the air or juggling with it. Just keep it still and look at the deepest part of the glass. And that should give you an indication of the colour. Now, I preempt what I'm tasting. In other words, I know what I'm looking for in a Syrah in this area. And I'm looking for a bright, intense, Baffle, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. I said, no, I'm not. You're not meant to sleep.
No, I don't sleep. I ask if they are ready for the
Really?
welcome. Yes.
I'm glad they served up the chef.
When you finish, I come.
So, anyway,
They are hungry.
look, this speech is going to take about 90 minutes, about an hour and a half. Alex, what?
My battery is not going to last that long.
Nor's mine. No, seriously, it's going to take about 5-10 minutes. It just seems like an hour and a half when you have to listen to it. But anyway, getting back to the colour, what I'm looking for is ruby red, bright, intense ruby red. And then I sort of move the glass forward a little. I'm looking for the translucent, the transparent part of the wine. You know, normally there's a little edge of clear transparency. Syrah shouldn't have too much of that. It's very dense wine. And if it has too much, it means that you're going to have problems when you start to taste it. So let's move on. So we've found the colour, intense bright ruby red. Now we go to find out the rest of it. I'm not swirling the glass at this time because I want to find out what the aromatics are. Aromatics come in two forms, floral and fruit. Sometimes the florals come first, it depends. But let's touch the florals. Dark blue florals, violet, peony, lavender. Those sort of florals is what I'm looking for when I'm taking in the wine. Fruit-wise, it's difficult because there's two sets of fruit, but I'll try and make it easy. Definitely dark cherry. That's the first I'm looking for. Then I'm looking for red currant, and maybe in the middle of it, prune. So we've got the three main fruits. We've got the aromatics. Then we go to taste the wine. Your tongue basically is in three parts. The first will pick up the astringency, so the alcohol, the tannins. Tannins come from the grape skin and the grape pit, and very important. But the most important thing is one word, balance. If the wine is disjointed, it just won't appeal. It needs to be balanced. And sometimes when you first taste a new wine, it's not balanced, but it will balance out later. So it does get a little bit confusing, but if you go into a wine and it's balanced, you're not getting too much alcohol, too much tanning, the acidity is not sort of making your mouth pucker, then you're onto a winner. So we take a sip, we've done the alcohol, we've done the tannins. What do we actually taste? Well, fruit, obviously, and then you get secondary fruit. And they're known as secondary nuances. And these come in various forms on this particular wine. Pomegranate, orange peel, raspberry, and sometimes blueberry. So you've got this under control, you've got the taste, you're into the mid-palate, and those are all the nuances. And one or two of you think, he's forgotten the most important. And the most important thing about Syrah is that it's got spice box. It's got a spicy nature. It's mainly black pepper, but sometimes it comes as clove or cinnamon, but it does have a spicy nature, and it's what it's famous for. Sometimes, a couple of the wines I've tasted down there, they're a little subdued on the spice, and that's because the weather has been very, very hot, the 18 vintage especially, very, very little spice coming through. But in a cooler vintage like the 19, you get that spice, which is lovely, and it lifts the energy of the whole glass. Once you go to the close, which is obviously the swallow, this whole thing, by the way, is known as the attack. When people like me who think they know what they're talking about get together, you know, it's known as the attack. So then we get to the end. What should be there? Well, no warmth, because if it's warmth, it's alcohol lead, and you don't want that. Is it dry? Are the tannins dry? If they are, that means that bitterness you get sometimes with the wine right at the back of the palate, on the close. The bitterness comes from the fact that the growing season isn't equal, and it's sort of had a bit of a bumpy ride, and if the tannins aren't fresh, they're never going to be fresh. Sometimes the fruit will, if the fruit quality is good, juice quality is good, it will outweigh it, but 9 times out of 10, no. So you don't need that dry flavour at the back, and you don't need the warm flavour because that's the alcohol. What you do need is length, and a little bit, it broadens the mouth. So when you're tasting it, it just sort of, it comes in and then just widens. Sometimes in a few areas, vertical as well as horizontal, but just widens, nice broad flavour, but you're looking for the fruit. You should leave a clean, clear mouthful that you want to say, oh, I want to do that again, but fruit is what you're looking for. And the quality of fruit is most important, because you cannot make good wine unless you have quality fruit. So that's about it from me, and thank you for staying awake, and enjoy your evening.
Grazie maestro.